At 2:14 local time, the first warning did not come from the bridge. It came from deep inside the destroyer, in the Combat Information Center, where a watchstander leaned toward a screen suddenly crowded with movement and spoke the words everyone in that room understood at once. Multiple fast contacts, bearing 086. Outside, the sea was completely black. No moon, no visible horizon. Only the faint glow of instrument panels over steel consoles and the steady hum of turbines driving a U.S. Navy guided missile destroyer through contested waters at controlled speed. On the bridge, the officer of the deck kept his eyes ahead. Below, on the tactical net, voices stayed calm, clipped, and precise. Nobody needed to raise their voice. The seriousness was already clear. The first clue was not visual. It was electronic. A sharp burst of emissions struck the ship's receivers from the northeast, followed by a second, stronger sweep from farther down the coastline. The pattern did not fit civilian traffic. It did not look like random interference. In CIC, the electronic warfare supervisor shifted his head slightly and confirmed what the room was already beginning to understand. They were not scanning the water. They were focused on the ship. The destroyer had been moving under a strict transit posture, fully alert but outwardly composed, one gray hull moving through black water. From a distance, it might have looked isolated, manageable, even vulnerable. Somewhere beyond the darkness, an Iranian crew had made a decision. They had identified a radar contact they thought they understood, and they had read it wrong. The tactical action officer gave the next order without hesitation. Set defense condition, maintain course, build the picture. In an instant, the ship changed character. Watertight doors sealed. Internal communications shifted from routine traffic to combat brevity. On the bridge, lookouts stared into darkness that gave nothing back. Below, symbols multiplied across the displays as operators drew from every available sensor. Surface search, air search, signal intercept, infrared cueing. No wasted movement, no repeated questions. The crew had lived this sequence before in drills, in simulations, in the long, unforgiving repetition that makes real decisions possible in seconds instead of minutes. Another report came in. Fast surface group now firm. 3 contacts, high speed, converging. 3 small signatures were cutting across the water fast. Not merchant traffic, not fishing boats. Their shape and movement were too deliberate. They were closing from spread positions, tightening the angle as if they expected hesitation from the ship ahead of them. They were not going to get it. The captain entered CIC quietly. No dramatic entrance, no speech. He looked once at the display wall, listened for 6 seconds, and asked the only question that mattered. Hostile intent? 3 stations answered almost together. Targeting behavior consistent. Surface group accelerating. Fire control activity possible, not confirmed. Not enough yet. The destroyer held its discipline. That was the part most outsiders never fully understood. A U.S. Navy warship did not become chaotic when the screen filled up. It became colder, sharper, more exact. Fear did not disappear. It got compressed into procedure. On the flight deck, under dim red lighting, a helicopter detachment prepared an MH-60 Seahawk for possible launch. Tie-down crews checked fittings more by touch than sight. The rotor blades were still folded, but not for long if the order came. Forward, gun crews were already at their stations. The close-in weapons system remained silent for now, its white housing aimed off the starboard bow like a machine waiting for the right second. At 2:16, the picture got worse. A new signal appeared, brief and narrow, the kind that makes trained operators sit a little straighter. This was no longer simple surveillance. It looked more like cueing, a handoff, one platform finding the target while another prepared to act. The air defense coordinator spoke into the net. Possible missile support activity. Nobody in CIC reacted outwardly, but the room tightened. On the bridge, the destroyer adjusted course just enough to complicate a firing solution while still appearing to hold steady transit. It was a small change, almost invisible to an untrained eye. Inside the ship, it meant something far more important. The crew had moved from watching the situation to shaping it. They were no longer just being observed. They were forcing the encounter onto their terms. Then the first visual contact came in. A lookout spotted a faint white streak low over the water off the starboard side. Not a missile, not yet. Just wake. Fast wake. Then another. Then a third, spaced wider apart. The 3 surface contacts were driving harder now, pushing through black water at speed, throwing spray with almost no visible light. Whoever was aboard those craft believed momentum was on their side. Surprise, darkness, numbers. They still thought they were closing on the right kind of ship. In CIC, one of the younger operators tracked the lead contact and watched it tighten its angle again, as though preparing for weapons employment. His cursor froze over the symbol for half a heartbeat before he reported, "Lead surface track showing attack profile." The captain did not blink. "Stand by." The order hung in the room like steel. No unnecessary movement. No one looking away from a scope. The destroyer kept cutting through the dark, bow rising and settling against the low swell. Every system was active now. Every weapon was ready, waiting for lawful confirmation. Somewhere ahead, Iranian crews were closing in, convinced they had found something exposed in the night. What they had actually found was a warship built for exactly this moment. At 2:17 local time, the first hostile launch warning hit the net. At 2:18, the alert came across the circuit with a clarity that removed all remaining doubt. Possible launch. Possible launch. Starboard sector. No one in the Combat Information Center asked for it to be repeated. The room had already crossed from concern into combat. What changed now was not the ship's posture, but the legal and tactical certainty of what was unfolding. The unknown behavior from minutes earlier was no longer uncertain. The vessels emerging from the darkness were not testing. They were committing. On the large display, the lead Iranian fast attack craft shifted formation just enough to open a firing lane. Another widened off its port side, likely trying to split the destroyer's sensors across multiple approach vectors. It was a familiar tactic. Small, fast, low-profile platforms pushing in under darkness, hoping speed and confusion could do what firepower alone could not. Against an unprepared ship, it might have worked. Against this one, it was a miscalculation. The tactical action officer leaned over his console as the electronic warfare team refined the picture. Another burst of emissions rippled across the receivers, short, aggressive, and tied to the same sector where the surface contacts had tightened their geometry. Whether it was targeting support, missile queuing, or a coordinated handoff, the meaning inside CIC was the same. The destroyer was no longer simply being tracked, it was being engaged. Track all three, the captain ordered. Weapons tight until confirmed hostile. No wasted shots. That discipline mattered. It always did. In the compression and noise of a nighttime surface fight, the difference between fear and control came down to procedure followed exactly under pressure. Everyone in the room understood the larger truth without it being said aloud. The ship did not win by reacting fast. It won by reacting correctly. On the bridge, the officer of the deck made another small course adjustment, just enough to complicate the inbound geometry while preserving the ship's overall movement. The destroyer did not turn away in panic, it turned for advantage. Below deck, the fire control teams were already assigning solutions, checking arcs, and preparing intercept options across layered defenses designed for exactly this kind of compressed threat window. Then another voice broke in, sharper this time. Low contact, high speed, bearing 091. The symbol flashed onto the screen and moved closer to the ship's outer defensive envelope. Whether it was a missile, a rocket-assisted round, or a drone skimming the dark, it was moving fast enough to force immediate action. The tactical action officer did not hesitate. "Recommend engage." The captain answered instantly. "Engage." The order moved through the destroyer like current through wire. Forward systems came alive. Fire control radars locked on. Defensive interceptors were committed in CIC. The air defense coordinator called bearing, speed, and closure, while operators tracked for secondary threats already forming behind the first. The ship's response was not one dramatic burst. It was a chain. Detect, classify, assign, engage, reassess. All of it executed in seconds by a crew that had trained until the sequence became instinct. Outside, the night split open. A defensive launch rose hard from the ship, burning bright against the black horizon before vanishing into darkness ahead. Seconds later, another followed. On the bridge, the flash reflected across armored surfaces and glass, then disappeared as quickly as it had come, leaving only darkness again and the knowledge that the ship was now fully in the fight. Splash possible, stand by for confirmation. No one relaxed. A first intercept never ended the danger. It only revealed the pattern. One contact broke apart on the scope, another remained. One of the Iranian craft had kept closing, using the confusion of the opening exchange to push deeper into effective range. Its speed increased, its heading sharpened. The men aboard that vessel either did not understand what they were charging toward, or realized it too late and kept coming anyway. The destroyer answered with another layer. Soft countermeasure systems activated first, reaching outward to disrupt the attack chain, break lock, confuse seekers, and inject doubt into whatever guidance was now trying to ride toward the ship. Behind that, the next layer stood ready, precise, controlled, and waiting. On the weather decks, sailors stayed low and braced as the destroyer pushed through its own spray and disturbed air. The close-in weapon system turned a few degrees and stopped there, no longer idle, now fully active. At 2:19, confirmation came in. The first inbound threat had been neutralized. The room absorbed the update without reaction, because another report followed almost immediately. Additional contacts accelerating. Surface group not disengaging. That was the point when the mistake on the Iranian side became impossible to ignore. If the attacking crews had thought they were closing on a lightly defended support vessel, this should have been the moment reality corrected them. A vulnerable ship did not launch layered defenses out of the dark. A vulnerable ship did not absorb the first move and instantly rebuild the tactical picture. A vulnerable ship did not keep maneuvering under pressure with this kind of control. And still, the Iranian craft kept coming. The captain studied the display for one silent beat, then gave the next order. Assume follow-on attack. Rebuild the picture. Find the next shooter. Inside CIC, nobody needed motivation. They were already there, already focused, already ahead of the next problem. The first wave had failed, but the sea around the destroyer was not getting quieter. It was getting more dangerous because beyond the burning debris of the first intercepted threat, a second attack angle was beginning to take shape. And this time, the Iranians were no longer closing on a ship they had misunderstood. They were closing on a U.S. Navy warship that was now fully awake. By 2:20 local time, the destroyer was no longer reacting to a threat that might develop. It was already inside the fight. Additional contacts accelerating, surface group not disengaging. The report came from CIC in the same controlled tone used for every other call that night, but by now its meaning was unmistakable. The first inbound threat was gone. The attacking craft had seen the ship's response. They had watched the darkness ahead erupt with defensive fire, and they had still chosen to press on. That decision changed the engagement. The captain stood behind the tactical action officer, eyes fixed on the display as the picture shifted second by second. 3 Iranian fast attack craft still formed the core of the surface threat, but their geometry was no longer clean. One had drifted wider to starboard, another had tightened toward the destroyer's projected path, cutting inward harder, as if trying to create a close-range firing chance before the ship's layered defenses could fully reset. The third remained farther back, likely acting as support, spotter, or backup shooter. "Prioritize lead and trailing support," the captain said. "Watch the center craft for sudden launch." On the bridge above, the destroyer stayed in command of its own movement. Every turn was measured. Every degree had purpose. She did not swing wildly. She did not throw away speed. She adjusted just enough to complicate the attack profile while preserving her own firing arcs. That was the difference between a ship reacting in fear and a warship controlling the fight. At 2:21, another warning flashed across the tactical net. New low contact bearing 088, closing fast. This one flew lower than the first and deeper in the clutter, using sea-skimming altitude and the darkness to compress reaction time. For one brief moment, the room seemed to narrow around that single track. Every eye in CIC shifted toward the same point on the screen. Fire control solutions updated. Threat priorities were reordered. Defensive layers were reassigned in real time. Recommend immediate hard kill. Approved. Engage. The response came almost instantly. A second interceptor left the ship with violent precision, climbing out of darkness before leveling into the threat corridor ahead. In CIC, the air defense coordinator called the closing geometry in clipped fragments, each number measuring how little time remained. 30 seconds. 26. Trackable. 22. Nobody spoke unless it mattered. Nobody filled the silence. The crew understood that at this stage, words would not improve the outcome. Execution would. Outside, the sea gave the first physical sign of how close the threat had come. Off the starboard bow, a burst of white spray jumped into the darkness. Not from impact on the hull, but from debris and shocks striking the water at speed. Something had died close, very close. The concussion rolled across the surface and reached the ship a split second later. Not enough to cause damage, but enough for topside sailors to feel it through the deck and rails. In CIC, confirmation followed. Second inbound destroyed. Again, there was no celebration because in that same moment, the lead Iranian craft used the distraction to push in harder. Lead surface track increasing speed. Possible weapons alignment? Recommend warning threshold crossed? The captain did not hesitate. Mark hostile intent confirmed. That sentence changed everything. Up to that point, the destroyer had been fighting to survive while staying disciplined under uncertainty. Now the uncertainty was gone. The ship had a legally and tactically confirmed hostile attacker inside the engagement zone. The combat system shifted with it. Target priorities moved from broad defensive sorting to direct action against identified hostile platforms. The lead fast attack craft, now clearly committed, was tracked with ruthless precision. Its speed, heading, angle of approach, and likely weapons envelope were updated continuously. The center craft was no longer just another contact on the board. It was the next problem to solve. Above, the flight deck team completed final preparations on the MH-60 Seahawk. Rotor blades unfolded into place. The aircraft did not launch yet, but it was ready. Another set of eyes, another sensor, another way to push the ship's awareness farther into the darkness around her. Forward, the gun crews stayed locked in. Close-in systems tracked automatically, waiting for anything that broke through. At 2:21, the attack craft made its move. The contact shifted 2 degrees, then 4, then tightened across the ship's bow. In CIC, one operator saw it first for what it was. He's setting for a firing lane. The tactical action officer answered immediately. Engage hostile surface track. The order was clean and final. No extra words. What followed was not chaos, it was sequence. The destroyer's weapons answered with the same cold efficiency that had defined every decision that night. Sensors fixed, solution held, engagement executed. On the display, the lead craft's symbol jerked, slowed, and broke apart as the contact lost coherence. Whether it had been disabled directly, forced into a violent evasive move, or broken in the water, its attack run was over. The geometry collapsed. But the sea was not finished. The trailing Iranian craft changed course abruptly, not away, but across, trying to exploit the confusion of the lead platform's failure. For a few seconds, the fight became a test of adaptation. Could they still create enough disorder, enough compression, enough movement to slip something through before the destroyer fully regained control? They could not. By now, the American ship was no longer simply defending. She was reading the entire engagement. Electronic warfare teams were harvesting emissions. Surface operators were predicting maneuver patterns. Fire control teams were no longer surprised by sharp angles or sudden speed changes. The captain watched the tactical plot settle into a new shape. And for the first time since 2:14, the advantage was visibly shifting. The Iranian crews had entered the encounter believing darkness was on their side. Now, darkness belonged to the destroyer, and as the broken remains of the lead attack run faded into black water, the surviving hostile craft began to do something they had not done all night. They started to lose confidence. At 2:22 local time, the destroyer saw the first real break in the attack. Not in the water, not in the air, in the behavior of the men coming at her. The surviving Iranian craft began to hesitate, not in a way an untrained observer would catch, but inside CIC, where hesitation showed up as angle changes, speed fluctuations, and broken geometry, the pattern stood out immediately. Trailing contact reducing speed, outer contact drifting wider, lead hostile profile no longer coherent. The captain kept his eyes on the display. He had seen enough engagements, enough drills, enough nights at sea to recognize the moment when an attack stopped being coordinated and started becoming reactive. The first inbound threat had been neutralized. The second had died close aboard. The lead fast attack craft had lost its run. Now the remaining Iranian crews were no longer controlling the timeline. They were being forced to live inside the destroyer's timeline. That was where ambushes failed. "Rebuild the picture," the captain said. "No assumptions. I want every contact accounted for." The order mattered because one of the most dangerous moments in any fight often came right after apparent success. A ship could survive the first move, disrupt the second, break the lead attacker, and still lose by relaxing too soon. The destroyer did not make that mistake. Every console stayed active. Every operator remained locked in. Threat rings, firing arcs, signal intercepts, and maneuver forecasts updated continuously as the combat team widened its view beyond the immediate kill zone. Then, the horizon shifted. Not with dawn. It was still far too dark for that. The change came from above the ship, aft of the flight deck, where the first motion of rotor blades began cutting through the night. Under dim red lighting, the MH-60 Seahawk came fully alive. The aircraft had waited through the first phase of the attack, held back until the ship could stabilize the most immediate danger. Now, with the surface geometry loosening and the destroyer regaining control, the captain had another option. Launch the helo. On the flight deck, the signal moved fast. Final checks. Hand motions under red light. Blade arc building. The helicopter lifted clear of the deck and climbed into black air over black water, banking toward the threat sector with sensors ready and its crew stepping instantly into the same fight the destroyer had already been living through for 7 relentless minutes. Inside CIC, the effect was immediate. Airborne sensor now on station, extending visual and infrared coverage. Outer surface contact acquired. The destroyer was no longer limited to what the attacking craft chose to reveal. Now the ship could see farther, classify faster, and apply pressure from above as well as ahead. The trap Iran had tried to build in darkness was beginning to reverse. One of the remaining Iranian craft swung sharply to port, its wake widening as it abandoned the tighter approach line it had held only moments earlier. Another turned just enough to suggest uncertainty without fully committing to withdrawal. That kind of half-decision was dangerous. A boat that was running could still fire. A boat that was hesitating could still become a shooter. The destroyer treated both the same way. Active threats until proven otherwise. Heavy wake on outer contact. Possible egress. Do not assume retreat. That was the tone across the ship now. Controlled, suspicious, exact. No triumph, no early relief. The destroyer had survived the opening strike, but survival was not the end state. Control was. From above, the Seahawk crew began feeding back the first full visual confirmations of the hostile formation. 3 fast craft had initiated the attack. 1 was no longer maneuvering effectively. The remaining 2 were separating, no longer keeping mutual support spacing, no longer presenting the clean, coordinated geometry that had marked their original approach. Their confidence had broken before their hulls ever disappeared into the dark. The captain listened to the reports and made the next move without drama. Shadow them. Maintain pressure. No overextension. It was a distinctly American response at sea. Not reckless pursuit, not emotional retaliation. Control through position, sensors, and unmistakable readiness. The destroyer held course with deliberate authority while the Seahawk orbited beyond, watching every turn, every wake, every abrupt course change from the boats that only minutes earlier had come charging in under cover of surprise. Now those same crews had to look up. The helicopter was on top of them. Its infrared sensor could pick out engine heat against the cold surface of the water. Its crew could follow every turn in real time. Its presence alone changed the entire mood of the encounter. The Iranian boats were no longer advancing on an uncertain shape in the dark. They were moving under direct observation, identified, tracked, recorded, and held inside the reach of a U.S. Navy combat system that had already broken their opening move. Then the radio call came. It was brief, indistinct, and edged with the kind of uncertainty that only appears after a plan has started to unravel. It was not a confident challenge. It was not a forceful warning. It was simply a transmission, late and unsteady, from men who now understood that the ship ahead of them was not what they had assumed. CIC logged it. No one answered emotionally. No one had to. The response came through posture instead, through the destroyer's steady course, through the helicopter overhead, through the fact that every surviving contact was still being tracked, still being measured, still being denied any chance to regain the initiative. At 2:24, the center Iranian craft finally made the choice the others had already begun drifting toward. Center contact turning away. A second later came the next update. Outer contact now in full withdrawal profile. That did not erase the danger, but it changed its direction. The attack was over. The escape had begun. The captain looked once more at the tactical display, then gave the order that defined the next phase of the night. Continue shadow, continue documentation. I want every move recorded, because the men who had come in from the dark were no longer trying to strike the destroyer. Now they were trying to leave before the rest of the U.S. Navy could enter the picture. By 2:25 local time, the attack had already failed. What remained was the part many crews feared more than the opening move. The moment after momentum breaks, when the side that came in hard suddenly realizes it is no longer shaping events, only reacting to them. Center contact turning away, outer contact in withdrawal profile, helo maintaining track. Inside CIC, the displays no longer showed a tightening attack pattern. They showed separation, divergence, confusion. The Iranian fast attack craft that had entered the night expecting to overwhelm a vulnerable contact were now opening distance in uneven lines. Their wakes were telling the story before the operators ever had to say it aloud. They were running. The captain did not smile. No one in that room did. On a U.S. Navy warship, the collapse of an enemy push was not a moment for emotion. It was a moment for confirmation. Confirm no additional shooters. Check for leakers. Keep the helo on the outer arc. The orders came one after another, flat and deliberate. The destroyer had regained control of the encounter, but control at sea only remained real if it was maintained. The crew understood that the surviving craft were turning away, yes, but a boat in retreat could still launch, still pass targeting data, still buy time for a second wave farther out. A professional crew never confused withdrawal with safety. Above the ship, the MH-60 Seahawk continued its orbit, extending the destroyer's vision deeper into the darkness. Its sensors tracked hot engines, hull wakes, and every sudden course correction from the fleeing boats. Each movement was recorded. Each emission was logged. Every failed maneuver became part of a tactical archive being built in real time. That was the final layer of Iran's mistake that night. They had not only moved against the wrong ship, they had moved against a ship capable of turning their failed strike into intelligence. At 2:26, a new report came from the electronic warfare console. Hostile emissions degraded, intermittent only, likely loss of attack coordination. That was what defeat looked like in modern naval combat. Not speeches, not dramatic surrender, just systems falling out of rhythm, targeting links breaking apart, and units no longer communicating with the same clarity they had brought into the first minutes of the encounter. The destroyer pressed its advantage without losing discipline. She did not rush blindly after the withdrawing craft. She did not waste weapons on a fight that was already collapsing. She stayed on them through bearing lines, sensor coverage, helicopter surveillance, and relentless tactical pressure. That restraint was not hesitation. It was control. The ship no longer needed to prove it could survive. It had already done that. What mattered now was making sure the attackers understood, with no room for misreading, exactly what they had challenged. On the bridge, the sea ahead remained black and empty except for the glow of instruments and the faint trace of disturbed water where threats had come apart minutes earlier. The officer of the deck held the ship steady. Helm input stayed minimal. The destroyer's posture was almost unsettling in its calm. She looked nothing like a vessel that had just been targeted in darkness by multiple fast-moving craft. She looked exactly like what she was, a U.S. warship fully in command of itself. Below, damage control reports began to come in. No battle damage to combat systems, no fire, no flooding, topside minor debris, wash only. The room received those updates the same way it had received every other report that night, with acknowledgement, not celebration. The crew had done its job. That was enough. Ammunition counts were reviewed, intercept sequences were logged, sensor data was flagged for transfer, voice circuits stayed disciplined. No one needed to say the obvious out loud. The obvious was already sitting on the screens. One attacking craft was no longer an effective fighting unit. The others were opening the distance at maximum speed, no longer closing, no longer testing, no longer pretending they controlled anything. Their attempted ambush had lasted only minutes. Its consequences would last much longer. At 2:29, the Seahawk crew passed back another update. Both remaining contacts increasing distance. No turn back observed. Full withdrawal continuing. The tactical action officer looked at the captain. The captain glanced once at the display, then gave the order that closed the encounter. Maintain shadow until clear. Continue full documentation. Return to controlled transit when threat picture allows. And that was it. No speeches over the net. No dramatic soundtrack. No shouted victory on the bridge. Just a ship settling back into disciplined motion after doing exactly what it had been built, trained, and manned to do. Outside, the black water swallowed the last visible traces of the retreating wakes. Above, the helicopter kept watch. Inside, the destroyer's systems remained active, sorted, and ready in case the night offered one more surprise. But the pattern was over. The men who had come searching for an easy target had already made their final mistake. They had gone into the dark expecting something exposed and unprepared. What they found instead was a U.S. Navy warship already alert, already tracking, already ready to absorb the first move and break the second. They had chosen the wrong ship. And from the moment they understood that, the rest of the night belonged to the United States Navy.